The committee is in order. This is regards to the subcommittee was assigned to Senate File 372. This is a bill for an act relating to educational savings grants for pupils attending a non-public school or receiving competent private instruction, establishing an educational savings grant fund, providing an income tax exemption, making appropriations, providing penalties, and including applicability provisions. Those are my opening comments. And I would welcome comments from my fellow senators here. If you have an initial comment, you're free to make that. If you're not interested in doing that, you can hold that till we're done and we can have comments from the gallery. Senator Celsi.
I'm really interested to hear everybody in the room, but first thing I want to say is this money will come straight out of the same pot as public school money. So unless you know where to find an extra $265 million, let me know. I have a lottery ticket in my wallet that's worth $322 if I win tonight. But that's a lot of money. And Iowa can't even afford 2% right now for our public school kids. I don't see how we're going to afford an extra $265 million.
Senator Zaun? All right, I would prefer that we have comments if we'd like to have some who are opposed and some who are in favor. If we could kind of alternate, I think that'd be a good idea. I'd like to hear from someone who thinks this is a good idea first, and we can start with that.
I can start. Do you want us to stand where we are? Or?
I think come on up to the table and grab the microphone so we can hear you.
Okay, this is good right here. Is that on already?
If you push the button, get a red.
There we go. Okay, thank you. My name's Trish Wilger. I'm the Executive Director of Iowa Advocates for Choice in Education and Iowa Alliance for Choice in Education. Thank you for taking comments today. School choice makes a tremendous difference to Iowa families. I've been working with the STO program for nearly 13 years now since its creation, and I cannot tell you how many families have come to me to talk about the STO program and how grateful they are to receive a grant that allows them to make a choice in education. An ESA program would transform our state to an even greater extent. So we are very supportive of the bill. Research has proven that school choice programs improve student achievement, they improve academic performance in neighboring public schools as well as private schools, and they improve parental engagement. There's a tremendous amount of data and research that supports school choice, but I wanted to talk about those who are at the center of this, and that's students and families. And this is simply about giving parents the ability to choose the educational option that they feel is right for their child. Children learn differently. We need to give them access to the option that works best for them. Iowa offers many high-quality options, and we need to give parents access to all of those options. This isn't about buildings or institutions or preserving the status quo. It's about parents and families. So we believe that this bill will clearly give a choice to parents who need and want an educational option other than their assigned school. And for that reason, we support the bill, and we would encourage you respectfully to pass it out of subcommittee today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, now if we could have someone who thinks this is not a good idea, if they could come up and give us a thought.
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. I'm Connie Ryan, lobbyist for Interfaith Alliance of Iowa Action Fund. The Constitution of the state of Iowa states, "The General Assembly shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, nor shall any person be compelled to attend any place of worship, pay tithes, taxes, or other rates for building or repairing places of worship, or the maintenance of any minister or ministry." 97% of accredited non-public schools in Iowa are religious institutions. We know they are religious institutions because they say so in their mission with clear statements on their websites and in their promotional materials. Religious institutions, by their very definition, are ministry. We also know they are religious institutions because they can legally opt out of certain laws because of their religious affiliation. They are allowed to teach their religious tenets and beliefs in their institution, proselytize, if you will. They can compel students to be part of the religious classes and religious practices as part of the student's education. They can have policies that limit admittance, attendance, and activities based on those religious beliefs. While these policies are allowed by law, our state's constitution also says we shall not compel Iowans to pay taxes in support of ministry. By their own statements, most non-public schools are religious institutions and are a ministry of their faith. This legislation would codify a pass-through of public dollars through parents to non-public institutions, 97% of which are religious. This is unconstitutional. Additionally, the legislation would give public dollars to those who choose homeschooling or non-accredited choices, a windfall of public dollars given to private individuals for their private choice. The last egregious part of the voucher bill is rolling over the unused public dollars given to parents for their private K-12 choices for the use of paying for their children's post-high school education. I wonder about the disparities you will create by the state funding the post-high school education of some of Iowa's students while clearly excluding public education students from receiving that same support. Public funds should not be diverted away from public education, the provider of education to over 92% of Iowa's children, to private educational choices. It most especially should not be used to subsidize religious institutions through that private choice or the private choice of homeschooling, or rolled over to subsidize the private post-high school education of those children while public school students are excluded from accessing those same funds. I urge you to oppose this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, if we could add another pro, okay, go ahead.
Hello, thank you for the opportunity today. My name is Simona Yentis, and I have a deep appreciation for school choices. I've benefited both from my parents' educational choices and my educational choices throughout my life. And I would say that every school promotes a worldview, and every school imposes that worldview on its students. And so I appreciate the fact that when my parents and when I chose Christian education, we could choose a value system that we agreed with. So I've been a Christian school student for 12 years, a Christian school parent for 24 years. I'm a Christian school grandparent. I worked at a Christian school for 15 years to support access for thousands of students. And I just want to give a little shout out to the Des Moines Christian Lions who are at the state basketball tournament this week. Now I'm currently a board member and a volunteer at Joshua Christian Academy. I had different experiences with both my previous school and JCA. The previous school tuition paid 97% of the cost of education. We fundraised the other 3% plus scholarships and capital expenses. At Joshua, tuition pays approximately 15% of the cost of education. Tuition is based on family income, and most of our school's budget is generated through the generosity of those who support our students. At our previous school, scholarships, and particularly the STO grants, made a huge difference for families that frequently we would lose families both at enrollment and re-enrollment due to funding, and because of adequate scholarships, it greatly decreased the turnover, which was very beneficial to students and those families. Joshua currently does not qualify for STO funding. We are not an accredited school yet. But really the families of Joshua Christian Academy are the perfect match for STO funding and for ESA funding. JCA provides a very important service to the urban community, and we are very grateful to be in and serving the urban community. Frequently, students are limited to the choices of their zip code, their school district, or family income. Education savings accounts allow parents to find a school that best fits their children's needs and, equally important, their values that they want to instill in their children. Schools can really, and I've witnessed this firsthand, schools can have a transformative effect on families, so choosing the right school is not just beneficial for our students, but also for our families. ESA levels the playing field for families with wealth and families who are of lower income. So I urge you to support Senate File 372, and I thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Somebody opposed?
Good evening. Senator Zaun, second time this week. Good to see you again. My name is Greg Dockham. I'm the president of the Johnston Board of Education. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you tonight about SF 372, the new school voucher bill. I'd like to start by saying that I support choice in education, and I agree that parents should have the choice to enroll their child in a private or religious school if they wish, as all children, as we know, learn differently. However, I do not believe that public taxpayer funds should be used for this purpose. Taxpayer dollars should only be used for education that is open and inclusive to all Iowans. Vouchers funnel public dollars through parents to non-public schools, which are not required to accept all students like public schools are. The public's investment should be used to support community schools, which are open to all students, regardless of race, religion, gender, socioeconomic status, and disability, not for a new entitlement program for parents who choose private education for their child. I'm also concerned about accountability and transparency. I'm a member of a publicly elected citizen governing board, emphasis on publicly elected, which is required to report academic results achieved in the Johnston School District to the general public, have an annual public financial audit, and be transparent with all expenditures and decision-making. Private and religious schools are not held to that same standard. Taxpayers have a right to know how their dollars are being spent, but would be left in the dark about the use and impact of these voucher funds. I believe that public schools are Iowa's greatest competitive advantage for a strong economy. In 2013, Iowans made a shared commitment through education reform legislation that was championed by Governor Branstad, designed to strengthen our public schools, knowing that strong public schools are vital to a robust economy. Several of those reforms are still not in place due to a lack of funds, and our schools are facing record low annual growth in funding to pursue local efforts. If new public funds are available in the state budget, the public interest is better served by investing those funds in improving the schools designed to serve all children. Efforts to promote choice in education should be created within community-based public schools, not outside of them. I would ask that legislators who are acknowledging that one size does not fit all reduce the overregulation of state and federal bureaucracy that's stifling the ability of local community school boards like mine to truly be responsive to parents and community needs. Let's invest in innovative schools, flexible program offerings, and greater partnerships among schools and in our communities. Now that would be a public interest. Finally, I'd ask that we all focus on public policy that encourages cooperation, not competition, between public and non-public schools to serve all of our students better. By setting up a voucher system that entices parents out of public schools and into private or religious schools, we would be creating a competitive environment that would erode our history of partnership and cooperation among Iowa's public and non-public schools. We all enjoy healthy competition between our schools on our football fields and basketball courts, but not in marketing wars for taxpayer dollars. Again, thank you for letting me share my thoughts with you. I would respectfully ask that you oppose SF 372. Thank you.
Thank you. If we could have another pro, thank you.
Chuck Hurley with the Family Leader. We support this bill. Thanks for bringing it. We believe that school choice is just. We believe that it's constitutional. You look at the Zellman case, money going to parents is the constitutional circuit breaker on any establishment clause issue. And we believe it works. Thanks for bringing it.
Thank you.
Keenan Crow with One Iowa Action. We represent the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender community here in Iowa. Thank you so much for having this hearing. That said, we are very much opposed to this piece of legislation. The reason that we are opposed is because of some of the reasons that were mentioned earlier by my colleagues. Primarily that these schools do not have the same standards as public schools do, and especially when it comes to the LGBTQ community. So last year when this bill came up, myself and the interns actually looked for every private school policy in the state that we could find. We found about 90% of them. And of that 90%, about 45% of those school policies either explicitly discriminated against LGBTQ people or reserved the right to discriminate against LGBTQ people. We don't think that public dollars should be going towards institutions that aren't willing to take students because of either their or their parents' gender or sexual orientation. That seems patently unfair to us. Not to mention the religious exclusions and potential exclusions for students with disabilities. It just doesn't seem fair to ask folks who aren't able to send their kids to these to subsidize them in that way when they're not held to the same standards. So I ask you to reconsider this bill and to put those public dollars back into public schools. Thanks.
Get another pro? Yes, sir.
Senators, thank you for allowing me to testify on behalf of school choice and Senate File 372. It is certainly a bill that I support. My name is Rob Zaley, and I've been a proponent of school choice initiatives for more than a decade now. I see educational savings grants as the pinnacle of school choice options. So I'm glad to see that this bill has been introduced. Thank you. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. First of all, I'm the father of 2 daughters, both of who are in high school, a junior and a freshman. Of course, I know she's a freshman. They've been going to private school all their time in their education. I'm also a member of the board of an STO board called the CTO, Catholic Tuition Organization, and that experience reflects on my opinion of this bill. As a stay-at-home dad, I was able to make time to learn about the topic of school choice. The more I learned, the more interested I became. With the help of organizations like EdChoice, I learned about study after study that shows that educational savings grants drastically improve the outcomes of kids who switch from public to non-public school, graduation rates, grades, college enrollment, reduction in trouble with the law. I also learned that there's the flip side. And this one's counterintuitive. There are 31 studies in the last 10 years that show that it's not just the non-public school that benefits or the students in those non-public schools, but seemingly the public schools also benefit with increased performance of their students. Seems to me logic would dictate that educational savings grants in this win-win situation would be a great choice for Iowa, especially as we're looking to improve our schools always. So that's the logical part of my choice. I can see the numbers and I can see how educational savings grants would benefit Iowans, but there's an emotional side too. And this is where my experience in STO comes in. As I do my volunteer work with STO, I can see each of the children that are benefiting from receiving assistance there are many, many kids from poor neighborhoods and single families that would not be in the school that fits their need without the assistance that they're getting from the STO program. It also makes me wonder about the kids. My work in STO makes me wonder about the kids that aren't getting assistance. Maybe it's because they're from a middle-class family that makes just above the income limit. There's a private school that might be a better fit for them, but they're in a public school because they can't get the assistance. The educational savings grants would certainly help families in this situation. I also think about children that are bullied in school, that are looking for a new environment. Parents who are satisfied with the public school right up until the moment that their kid comes home and they find that he's been bullied. We need a way to get those kids out of that environment, and I think that educational savings grants would certainly help these parents find a better fit for their kids. As you're debating this bill, I hope that you will remember my testimony. And I hope that you will remember that educational savings grants can be a win-win. Both the students who stay in public schools and the students that choose a private option can benefit from educational savings grants. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Now, if we could go to a negative, con, pro, con item.
Thank you, Senators, for the opportunity to speak. I'm Phil Jennery. The Government Relations Director for the Iowa Association of School Boards. And we are very opposed to this legislation. Our members have spoken very clearly on this issue in their opposition to it. One of the things that I kind of want to talk about is, you know, the fabric of a lot of our communities is public education. And several communities, the one that I grew up in, has a public school and a private school. And the cooperation that both of those schools have benefits every student that goes to that school. And so I think that trying to pit public versus private is not the way to do it. And given the fact that we already have several avenues of school choice, whether it be open enrollment, online, there are some schools now that are really doing some great things in terms of, you know, with the Future Ready Iowa initiative. There are things that the Iowa Workforce Development is doing in terms of registered apprenticeships. And that just speaks to the volume that school boards, public schools are doing and moving to give the students the type of education that they need. And pitting one against the other is not the right public policy. And again, as Greg said, the transparency portion is something that really concerns us. You know, school boards have several things that they have to do. They are under the open meetings law. Their documents have to be posted online. They are locally elected by the same folks that elect you. And so having that transparency taken away with public taxpayer dollars, it's very concerning. So I appreciate what you're trying to do, trying to give an education that fits every student. But we believe that that public school already provides that opportunity for every student. So I would urge you to oppose this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you. Another pro? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Senators. My name is Scott Jensen. I'm with the American Federation for Children, the nation's largest school choice organization. I'm from Wisconsin, where I served in the state legislature for 14 years, including 3 terms as Speaker, and where I was the young Chief of Staff to Governor Tommy Thompson in 1990 when we passed the nation's first private school choice program. The first wave of those programs were really all about school choice, that parents would be able to select the school that was best for their child. And now a new wave of these programs have come forward around the country that allow parents to really choose from a wide variety of educational providers and customize the education to meet the needs of their particular child. So perhaps they want their child to go to a school with smaller class sizes or a faith-based approach, but that school doesn't only teaches Spanish and they would like their child to learn Mandarin, or the school doesn't have a big, strong science program and their child has an interest in physics or chemistry. They could send their child to that school and then supplement their education with programs at a neighboring college or online program or a personal tutor in which they could pick up those additional subjects and create and customize the education that their child needs. There are 6 states that have created education savings account programs so far, and many others are considering it very seriously, including your neighbors here in Missouri. Most of these programs have begun serving this group of students for which customization might be most important. Quite frequently they begin with special needs programs, special needs students or foster kids, but then quite frequently those programs, as years go by, they keep adding additional groups of students for which this customization feature is really found to be important and valuable. The bill you have in front of you is very ambitious. It begins with all the students in the state in K through 12. But I would ask you, while you argue about exactly what population of students perhaps should be able to have this opportunity, I'd ask you to look at the underlying fundamentals of the bill. And I would point out that the financial accountability provisions in this bill are solid. This bill requires regular audits. It says that you need to protect the taxpayers against the possible misspending of any funds using insurance or fraud prosecution, the banning of parents, schools giving parents any sort of rebates. So it has a number of things that we've learned over time really work around the country in making sure that the funds that you as stewards of the taxpayers' money have some responsibility to make sure are well spent. I would also like to point out, you have one feature I have not seen in any ESA bill around the country that I think is quite smart. I think I've probably read all of them around the country. But on page 5, you had a provision that extends the time in which a student could use any funds set aside for college. Normally, in most states, if you don't spend all the money in a particular year, your parents are smart shoppers, and you don't spend all the money, you can roll it over to the next year, and you can roll it over for college education in the future. But at some point, states recently put a deadline as to when you can stop using that money and before it has to be returned back to the state. In this case, you are extending that deadline for military service, and that makes sense to me. If a child comes out of high school, their parents have set aside $3,000 or $4,000 in that account that they didn't use during their years in high school, and now the student wants to do military service, they shouldn't lose the chance to use that money that they'd saved up for college. And you would extend the deadline for that by the number of years in which they're serving the military. After all, there's still many people in this country who see the military as a way in which their family can afford to go to college. And so they shouldn't be penalized for that. So I thought that was very clever and a good idea. I would encourage you to advance this bill out of the subcommittee, continue to refine it at the next level at the committee.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity to talk about this issue today. I'm Margaret Buckton, and the 2 organizations I work with, the Urban Education Network and the Rural School Advocates of Iowa, are both registered strongly opposed to this legislation. First, I want to talk about how much school choice we already have. We have open enrollment into 2 online academies from any school district in the state. We have open enrollment between school districts. We have open enrollment between buildings within school districts. We have great private schools. We have 2 kinds of homeschool, both independent private instruction and competent private instruction. For the scholarship support through school tuition organizations, for families below 400% of the federal poverty level, there is tuition assistance. Just so you understand how much money that is. For a family of 5 that has 3 children, 2 adults, that's $117,680 in annual income. So anybody below that level can get that school tuition organization scholarship. So when the first speaker and a subsequent speaker both said that school choice actually improves our public schools' outcomes and improves choice for parents as well, I haven't seen any research that says incrementally more school choice also has that similar benefit. And it's an extraordinary amount of money, hundreds of millions of dollars, to take that additional step without documentation. It will be better for students either exercising the choice or students in the public schools. For our rural schools in particular, there are not a lot of private school choice options for them. So the only way parents could take advantage of this would be by homeschooling. We're concerned, especially in remote areas, there's not enough oversight on expenditures, and we don't want to create some kind of a profit motive for parents to keep children at home if there's not enough oversight to make sure that that money is actually being invested in their child's education. But more importantly, for every child that's not in our rural schools when we have declining enrollment, it's actually denying program choice to those students who remain, because it takes the entire community of children to create an economy of scale to provide all of the options that our students need. Then when we talk about a level playing field for public dollars in terms of accountability of those taxpayer investments, I've heard a couple of things about this. It's not just that taxpayer dollars deserve that kind of oversight, but it's also that the private school options must accept all children, and that we ought to have a level playing field in accountability for state testing, where now our private schools and homeschool students do not have access to the same kind of oversight for participating in the state test to know that those dollars are being invested wisely. In 9 of the last 10 years, the increase in the cost per pupil for public schools has lagged the cost increases that schools experience. So we would ask that you set this bill aside and invest in public schools with public dollars first. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more pros you want to talk?
Hi, my name is Tracy Bonde. I'm the superintendent of schools for the Diocese of Des Moines. I think we must start by realizing that we need to admit that the best educational outcomes for students requires us to be able to individualize the student experience. This can only happen with opportunities for school choice. Parents are the primary educators and are best able to determine the educational environment that will allow their child to flourish. ESAs will provide the educational flexibility that will improve a child's life and learning opportunities. I want to read to you today from a parent that currently uses both public and private school choices here in the Des Moines area. My name is David Ortega. My grandparents came to the U.S. as migrant farm workers working the sugar beet fields in northern Iowa. My father grew up in the area known as the Southeast Bottoms along the Des Moines River. We come from very humble beginnings. We are thankful that over the years, there have been public and private programs that have helped to provide assistance in the areas of food, shelter, and education. Today, I am blessed with 8 children, ages 9 to 22. My wife and I have sacrificed to provide most of them with a Catholic education. This could not be possible without the Catholic Tuition Organization. CTO was able to help us send most of our children to Catholic grade schools and Dowling Catholic High School over the years. We are very thankful. I am thrilled to know there is consideration in the Iowa legislature to set up educational savings accounts that would allow families like mine to decide how to use state funds, whether for public or private education and other allowable services. Since some of our own children attended public schools, this would allow for true universal school choice. My understanding is that state dollars would be allowed to be used for grants that would allow for educational expenses such as private school tuition, textbooks, tutoring, and online learning. Please consider not only Hispanic families like mine, but all Iowa families with children who would benefit tremendously from the proposed educational savings outcomes. As a state, we all benefit from students who are well educated, maximize their skills and talents, and are able to give back to their local communities. ESAs indirectly raise the expectations of all school programs, and as such, benefit the whole community. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more cons?
Good evening, Melissa Peterson with the Iowa State Education Association, and we are registered in firm opposition to this bill. Many of the reasons that have already been shared by some of the other public education stakeholder groups, I will not repeat. But I would like to emphasize that just for a little context, if this bill has the same fiscal note or a similar fiscal note to the voucher bill that we saw last year, I believe it was by Senator Schneider, which I was lots of bills to review this week, but I think that the language is very, very similar. And this would give the per pupil funding amount to folks who were interested in utilizing the vouchers, including homeschool students, I believe. I believe the price tag on last year's bill was $265 million. Just for a little context, we just passed an SSA proposal of 2.06%. I appreciate that was higher than it's been the last couple of years, but I think all can agree, if we could, we wish we would have been able to do more. If you take $260 million and you divide it by 40, which is the approximate 40 million, by the way, which is approximately the cost of 1% of SSA, we could have made an investment for the cost of this bill into our public schools that serve more than 485,000 students across the state. We could have served them with SSA of 6.5%. That ISEA would call adequate funding. That would enable us to put not only a teacher librarian and a school nurse and a counselor or a social worker in every single school district, right? But it would help us to reduce our class sizes. It would help us to actually enhance some of our robust school choice opportunities, including our existing dual enrollment and concurrent enrollment courses, our magnet schools, our existing public charters. There are a lot of innovative things that are happening in public schools in Iowa right now. We just need additional resources to meet the needs of all those students. Please, as this conversation moves forward, this does not have to be a public versus private conversation. We already, as a state, help contribute more than $60 million to subsidize private school education. That includes homeschool education as well. Keep in mind, we subsidize their transportation services, their special education services, their AEA services, textbook and tax credit, the tuition tax credits that's been discussed, the STOs. We already make substantial investments in this particular area. If we have additional resources at our disposal, let's give them to the more than 92% of kids in this state that are served by our public schools. And once we have that all taken care of, then let's think if we can't find a way where we might be able to be additionally beneficial to our private schools. We know we have quality programming. We just need to make sure we're putting our vital public resources into public entities that frankly are responsible for doing the best good for the greatest amount of kids. If for some reason you do decide to move this bill forward, despite the expensive price tag, I would ask for you to hold private schools who are going to be in receipt of these vouchers accountable just the way we do public schools. I would like to see elected boards, not just appointed boards. I would like to see budget discussions held in public. If these are taxpayer dollars, taxpayers ought to be able to have the same level of transparency and accountability that they currently have with our public schools. And then I would also ask you to strongly consider this ability to carry forward these dollars for higher education expenses. My goodness, is there a single parent in this room who wouldn't like to have that opportunity to be able to use those resources? That seems really, really generous. What I think might be a better use of those resources is adequately funding our community college programs, or putting those resources into our Future Ready program, STEM programs, CTE programs, stuff that we know that will benefit all kids. Our public schools are here to deliver a quality education to anyone and everyone, regardless of your zip code, your skin color, your sexual orientation or gender identity, your poverty level, anything. That's our responsibility, and it's our privilege to do that in our public schools. And we really think that's where the money should go. One other thought I will leave you with, and I apologize, I don't have my graphic with me today. But for those of us that sat through the tax and revenue presentation, I believe it was the week before legislative session started, they typically prepare a really great map that shows where the textbook and tax credits are going for private schools. If you look at that map, you will see there are places that have private school deserts. Okay? We've got a lot of rural area in this state. There are some communities that we know that elementary schools, parochial elementary schools, for example, are a bit more frequent right? So you've got K through 5, and then it's not unusual for once you have experienced that private school in those K through 5 years, then you move on to higher education. When you look at the availability of private high schools across this state, you will see deserts. I only point this out because it's very important to understand that the lion's share of these resources, these voucher resources, if this bill is to move forward, will not benefit the lion's share of Iowans for no other reason than they literally will not have access to the private institutions this would incentivize. So just a final consideration. Let's do what's best for the 93% of Iowa's kids that go to our public schools if we have additional resources. Thank you.
Thank you. How are we doing? Are we winding down? Or we got some more? Oh, we got some more yet. All right. Let's go pro.
Senators, I'll keep it brief. My name is Drew Klein with Americans for Prosperity here in Iowa. We're extremely supportive not only of this proposal, but of all proposals that advance the mission and the vision of school choice. I think this helps us to start to really think broader about our education system outside of simply looking at school buildings and the way that those dollars flow. This really empowers parents to make the decision that's best for their family, and that may even be different for the different children that they have within that family. And I think that's really where the trend is going. We're a generation. My generation is a generation that believes in the customization, and we don't buy into packages of anything. I think in education that's going to continue to be the trend, and an ESA proposal really starts to advance that type of vision for what could be the next generation of education in this country. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more cons? Are we running out of people, or where are we at? Oh.
Hi, I'm Morgan Miller with AFSCME Council 61, and I don't think any of my points haven't already been said, but Senator Celsi, I think you hit the nail on the head that to fund this program would mean to take funds away from other programs. The Senate Majority Leadership released their budget for fiscal year 2020 today, or their targets, and it's the exact same budget target as 2019. So that's deeply concerning to an organization that represents public employees at all levels of government, because that means that to fund this program would take money away from other parts of public service like mental health, our correction systems, our courts, and our public schools. So we are opposed to this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak, or are we winding down?
I'm on the same.
You're on the same, well, I don't care. Go ahead. If you want to speak, now's the time. I would like to get this wrapped up if we can, so I want everybody to speak that can.
I'll be brief.
All right.
Dave Wilkerson with School Administrators of Iowa, and we're registered in opposition to the bill. There's a lot of research out there on student achievement, and that compares private schools to public schools, and public schools to public schools, and private schools to private schools. And a lot of that research goes both ways, so I'm not even going to talk about that. But School Administrators of Iowa will defend forever, we believe, people's right to private school, homeschool, and public school. We just don't believe that public dollars ought to be expended for the private schools. And so we believe that it would create some situations around our state where we currently have a great deal of cooperation between our private and public schools. We believe that would be a detriment to that, and that schools wouldn't be best served with it. It's about as far as it goes for me. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else like to speak? Yep, we got another one. All right.
I'm Linda Wormley, citizen from rural Newton. Are any of you subcommittee members from the country? I may be, maybe Fran, but I may be the only person who started school in a one-room schoolhouse out in the country, whose father, when he went to town in 8th grade, wore bib overalls and got beat up by the country kids, by the city kids. But that's what this bill feels like to country kids and to rural school districts. They have some options, but even now, I have a data limit in the country. How would I do school with a data limit on the amount of computer things I can get at my home? So there are options, but they're very restricted. And families are restricted, transportation, whatever else. If they want to go elsewhere, they don't have the opportunity for this. I just can't see why it is an equitable solution for all the rural children in the state. They need the money because those little small towns, those little schools, those are what hold an economy together in the country for a rural district. If a rural district goes belly up, the town will follow it. And these kids need every educational opportunity they can have, and to take public money and shift it to metro areas where there are already more options just does not feel fair. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Senators. Excuse me. I'm John Cacciatore. I represent the Des Moines Public Schools, and we're registered opposed to the bill. And I want to briefly say why. Public dollars and public schools have requirements they have to meet to educate their children that go to those schools. At a private school, and I know I went to one, they don't have to meet those same requirements. So the public dollars would go to the family or go with the student to that private school, and they wouldn't meet those same requirements. We see that as a problem in the public school system from the public school vantage point. And secondly, in terms of choice, the choice won't necessarily be the families. The school decides who they want to take and who they don't want to take. So public dollars are with the family. They think they might have a choice, and then the private school turns them down. So that's the reality, and that's some of the reasons we oppose the bill. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We're winding down on discussions. Senator Zaun or Senator Celsi, would you like to make any comments? Senator Celsi?
Well, I'm an insider, folks. I went to 12 years in private school, believe it or not. And then I served for 3 years on the Board of Education of the largest high school, Catholic high school in Iowa. I was on that board when STOs started, and I was in on the discussion at that time. Guess what? It's a growth strategy. Incomes were going down, parish incomes were going down, liability costs were going up, teachers were demanding to be paid the same as public school teachers, and nuns and priests were retiring at a accelerated rate. Basically, their free workforce was retiring. So they had to step it up. They did not have the resources to do so, so they decided to go after public dollars. I was there when the discussions were being held. I was in the room. So no one can tell me that that didn't happen, because I heard it with my own 2 ears. There's no evidence that voucher programs create better student achievement. Just want to get that on the record. When the Wisconsin voucher system was started, as a previous speaker was alluding to, what it created is a race to the bottom in Wisconsin, and it created a flood of teacher defections to other states. Not only did they gut collective bargaining in Wisconsin, then they created the voucher system, which further eroded that system there. So I see we're following the Wisconsin playbook. I'm firmly opposed to it for multiple reasons. It's bad public policy, and we should not do it.
Senator Zaun?
Yes, thank you. First of all, this discussion is not about public versus private for me, because there's great public schools. One of them, sitting right back there in the third row, Johnston. Incredible school district. What this is about is empowering parents, where they don't have to send their kids based on what their zip code is. I think there's some confusion. I think the term of voucher has been used a lot. ESAs and vouchers are completely different. This bill, I encourage everybody to read this. This bill here is an ESA. There is 6 other states. Milwaukee's done this, I don't know how many years, way before the collective bargaining thing that happened in Wisconsin. There are several states that have switched over to ESAs. What the ESA is it allows parents to find the best educational opportunity for their kids. And we all know that our, different school districts have different amount that they spend per pupil based on property taxes, based on a lot of different variables. This allows a parent to shop. This works in the business world. As consumers, you have the opportunity to pick the best opportunities, the best bargains that you can. If there's any money that's left over based on where they live, they get the opportunity to put that into a savings account that could be used to enhance their education while they're in K through 12, or if possible, if there's something left over, move it over to whatever they want to do for college or after they graduate from high school. I would be happy to share any kind of student achievement studies. I've seen them. I believe the last time I saw them, it was mentioned 30, I don't remember 30, but I remember factual information that shows that student achievement in both public and private schools increase. Why? Because there's competition. Religion being forced upon yourself. I used to be a Catholic and left the Catholic Church for many reasons. My children were not practicing Catholics. Full disclosure, they went to Dowling High School. They were never told that they had to participate in any kind of those services that are there. The reason why my wife and I decided and made the sacrifice, is it's very expensive to go to these schools, is because we wanted to create a better opportunity for our kids. Special ed, that's an argument that I always hear, but let me just give you an example in Arizona. In Arizona, the Arizona School for the Deaf and Blind has 2,000 students with a $53 million budget. High school graduates from that school read at an 8th grade level. 70% of them, of the grads, are unemployed. What happened is a group of investors, but it was mostly parents, formed the Foundation for Blind Children. There's 2,000 students there with an $8 million budget. 92% of the graduates go to college, and the unemployment rate of these graduates are at 5%. What it did is it attracted competition. Open enrollment is brought up. Yes, there is open enrollment state, but there is 5 school districts that cap the open enrollment under the disguise of diversification. We're trying to fix that as well. Accountability brought up some great points. I do believe that non-public schools should have to live by the same standards as public schools. That is only fair. So I think that that's a very important thing that has to be added to this bill if it moves anywhere. In regards to stifling schools with rules and regulations, I think we just demonstrated in the Education Committee, we have tried very hard to enhance local control. I remember when, and I've been very consistent on this issue, going way back to when I ran for a state senate. And I remember we had our forums in Urbandale, and the sitting superintendent of Urbandale, who's another good school district, said to me, bring it on. We can compete. That's what we're talking about here. To me, this is an extension of the STOs. I was here when we started the STOs. The STOs are capped out and maxed out every year because parents are starving to get out of these poor performing schools. There's great public schools, incredible public schools in the state of Iowa. I could just cite locally the Central Academy. It's a privilege to go to that school, and I'm appreciative of their efforts there. I would encourage everyone to tour any of the K through 8 schools that are non-public. I don't care what religion it is. I don't even care if there is a religion base. But they're non-public schools. They're an option for parents. Tour Joshua Academy. There is something that grew from parents and grandparents, and I've been to their fundraiser every year. This is an incredible school offering to these kids in these terrible environments that they come out of. I certainly would be very supportive of, I know this bill, come on, we can't afford this bill, I understand that. I am encouraging and would support an amendment that we start with IEP students or K students, just to start the process to allow parents to have the opportunity to choose the best educational opportunities like so many Iowans and Americans have. I don't think it's fair that the former President Clinton as well as former President Obama, he sent his kids to non-public schools. It's not about public versus non-public. It's about the best educational opportunities for children. And I believe in parents would be smart enough to figure that out. So I'm ready to sign on to this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I just want to take just a couple of seconds and kind of conclude this, and I want to thank each and every one of you for taking the time to come here. I took notes prolifically on everything that everybody said, and I really value everybody's comments. I also want to share with you that I came down to this place in 1996. I was elected in 96. My first session was 1997. And back in 97 and 98, we did a school reform. That was one of President Branstad's parting things that he wanted to leave the legislature with, was a revamp of education. And he wanted to have some really important things in there. But one of the things they left out was the most important thing, and that's competition and involvement of the parents. I was told way back then, the single biggest factor that determines how well a child does in school is the involvement of the parents. And they all laughed and chuckled and said, well, you can't legislate parental involvement. So they just chuckled and said, well, okay, let's go to the second biggest factor, which they said was the quality of the teachers. And we've been working all this time on quality teachers. We've got how many programs now to get quality teachers? And I don't debate that. That's a great thing. We do need to have quality teachers. I'm not complaining. But we've skipped over what involves the parents. So now let's go back to what does involve the parents. Every single study I've seen says that parental choice involves the parents. I mean, are you kidding me? It's so direct. They're going to decide where their child is actually going to get to go to school. It's a direct involvement. It's the quickest, most direct involvement that we can entertain. This is truly a bill of passion for me. I've been working on this, not specifically since '98, but I do believe that parental involvement is the key. And I think that's what this really introduces. I also heard one of the comments today said that within, they wanted to reduce, I'm trying to think of the word now, they wanted cooperation, not competition. And whereas I get that, I would also respectfully disagree and say that according to our own courts have said, quote, monopoly power can harm society by making output lower, prices higher, innovation less than would be the case in a competitive market. There is nowhere where over 90% of a market is not considered a monopoly. So I think it's absolutely critical if we're going to get innovation, if we're going to really unleash the potential that we can to educate our children, I think a bill like this has to move forward. And I wholeheartedly agree with the concept. I wholeheartedly agree with the bill. And you may be right, Senator Zaun. We maybe can't do it all, but it's been also my experience in this place that you better start by asking for as high as you possibly can, because you can always tone it back. It's very difficult to go up from where you start. So with that in mind, I'm willing to sign this and recommend passage and continue it going. And I want to thank everybody for coming. And
Can I make another comment?
okay, you
Thank you,
already
Senator.
did. I would just as soon wrap
Thank you,
this up.
Senator. I appreciate it. I just want to make a little bit of a response comment to your competition comment. I just think that's ridiculous. Schools are not businesses. They do not compete with one another. They are busy enough taking care of the kids in their own building and trying to meet their own benchmarks than to worry about what's going on across town. I just think that's a non-thing. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, I would say that the committee is adjourned. Senator Celsi, I assume you do not want to sign this?
No, sir.
All right, thank you.